Picture this. You have finally done it. You have saved up a real chunk of money. Your investing account is open, and you are ready to take that first big step. Then you glance at the news. The screen is a sea of green, and the headline is flashing, "The market just hit another all-time high." Your thumb hovers over the buy button, and that familiar hesitation creeps in. Buy low, sell high, right? So buying at the very top feels wrong. It feels like walking straight into a fall. Every instinct tells you to hold your cash, wait for things to cool down, and buy the inevitable dip. But what if waiting for that perfect drop is actually riskier than buying at the top? By the end of this video, you are going to know exactly why that feeling of danger is lying to you and exactly what to do instead. Welcome to Grow with Tony. I'm Tony, and today we're taking on the fear that freezes more new investors than almost anything else, putting your money in when the market is sitting at an all-time high. This video is for educational purposes only and is not financial advice. Please do your own research before making any investment decisions. Here is why this matters so much. The all-time high fear is sneaky because it disguises itself as discipline. When you tell yourself you are just being patient, it feels like being a smart shopper. But the market is not a store that quietly runs a sale every month. And holding out for a better price has a hidden cost that never shows up on a statement. So let's actually put the fear to the test. We are going to look at why a record high feels so dangerous. What history really shows when you buy at one, the surprising cost of sitting on the sidelines, and the honest limits that nobody mentions, including a real example of when buying the top genuinely did hurt. By the time we are done, those words all-time high should feel a lot less scary. So why does a record high feel like such a trap? If your gut tells you to pull back when the market is peaking, you are not being irrational. You are being human. There is a concept in psychology called loss aversion, which just means the pain of losing money hits. About twice as hard as the joy of gaining the same amount feels good. So when you see a chart that has been climbing for years, you do not see all that growth. You see how far there is to fall. Your brain quietly treats the peak like the edge of a cliff. And honestly, that instinct makes sense in the physical world. What goes up must come down. But the stock market is not governed by gravity. It is governed by economics, company earnings, and inflation. Taking the instincts you use for the physical world and pasting them onto the market is exactly where a lot of well-meaning people get stuck on the sidelines for years. On top of that, there is recency bias, which is a fancy way of saying we assume that whatever just happened will keep happening. If the market has been rising for months, we brace for it to snap back. If we still remember a crash from years ago, we assume this high must look just like the last one before the fall. Now layer on a constant stream of doom and gloom headlines, because fear gets far more clicks than the market is functioning normally. Put it all together and you get paralysis. The story you tell yourself becomes, "It is too high. It has to come back down before I buy." It sounds careful. It feels smart. But here is the question that actually matters. Does the real history of the market back that story up? To answer that, we have to stop reading headlines and start looking at the data. Here is the first thing to sit with. In a market that grows over time, new all-time highs are a feature, not a glitch. According to RBC Global Asset Management, since 1950, the S&P 500, which is really just a basket of about 500 of the largest companies in the US, has set well over 1,000 all-time highs, on its way to where it is today. When you break that down, it averages out to somewhere around 17 new highs every single year. 17. That is not a rare, once-in-a-decade event. It is a routine, one happening roughly every few weeks. Think of it like a child growing up. Every few months, the parents mark a new line on the wall, and every time, it is the tallest they have ever been. Would you look at that line and think, well, they have hit an all-time high in height, so they must be about to shrink? Of course not. That would be silly. They are at a new high because they are growing. The market makes new highs for the very same reason. The companies inside it are earning more over time. Now flip it around. Imagine your personal rule was that you would never buy when the market is at a high. If you had followed that rule strictly for the last 70-plus years, you would have sat out almost every good stretch of growth in history. because the market spends so much of its life at or near record highs. Waiting for it to not be near a high really means waiting for it to be doing badly. You would be telling yourself that you only want to invest when companies are struggling and the economy is in a slump, which means quietly skipping the exact periods of strength that build the most wealth. Okay, but what actually happens if you buy at the peak? Most beginners assume it is a guaranteed way to lose money. History tells a very different story. When you look at the analyses from firms like RBC and JP Morgan, money invested only on all-time high days has historically earned returns close to the market's long-run average, and by several of those studies, even a touch better than investing on an ordinary, random day. I am keeping that relative on purpose, because the exact figure shifts depending on which study and which years you look at, but the direction is remarkably consistent across all of them. Buying at a high has simply not been the trap that people fear. Why would that be? Because a record high is rarely a fluke. It usually shows up when the economy is genuinely growing, with companies posting strong profits, employment holding up, and people spending. That kind of strength tends to carry forward, and it does not usually evaporate the instant the market prints a new record. Now, I know the question in your head, but what about the crashes? What about the big drops? This is where we separate a dip from a disaster. According to RBC, looking back at the history since 1950, a drop of more than 10% within a year of hitting an all-time high has been the exception, not the rule. It only happened about 9% of the time. And looking further out, the market has never been down more than 10% at the end of a 5-year stretch following any of its all-time highs since 1950. Now, that is history, not a promise for the future, but it reframes the entire picture. An all-time high is not a ceiling that the market slams into and bounces off. Historically, it has been more like a step on a staircase. One high gets reached, it becomes the new floor, and then the market climbs toward the next one. So if buying at a high is not the disaster we feared, where is the actual danger? It is in sitting out, waiting for a better moment. That is what we call market timing, the attempt to predict the perfect time to jump in and out. And it is brutally hard to pull off even for the professionals. Look at the JP Morgan Guide to the Markets. They found something genuinely surprising. The market's very best days tend to cluster shockingly close to its worst days. About 7 of the 10 best days landed within roughly 2 weeks of one of the 10 worst days. In their analysis, an investor who simply stayed fully invested ended up with roughly double the long-run return of someone who missed just the 10 best days. Sit with that. Trying to dodge a handful of scary days could quietly cost you half of your growth over 2 decades, because to avoid the worst days, you have to be out of the market at the exact moment the best days hit. And there is a second trap hiding inside, waiting. Let's say you decide today's high is just too high, so you sit in cash and wait for a 20% correction. Year 1, the market climbs about 10%. Year 2, it adds another 12. Year 3, another 8. You are anxious, but you hold your ground. Then in year 4, it finally happens. A shock hits the economy, and the market drops a painful 20%. You step in and buy, feeling completely vindicated. But do the math. After 3 years of gains stacking up, even a 20% drop leaves the price higher than where. You refused to buy back at the start. You waited years, you missed the dividends along the way. And your so-called discount still cost you more than just buying at that first high. Waiting was never actually free. Let me make this one unforgettable with a well-known illustration from investing circles. It is the story of an investor we will call Bob, and Bob was the world's worst market timer. Bob had one very unfortunate talent. He only ever invested his savings right at the peak, moments before the market fell apart. He put his money in at the top in 1972, just before a brutal crash. He did it again in 1987, right before the Black Monday collapse. He bought the top again in 1999, right before the dot-com bust. And one final time in 2007, right before the global financial crisis. 4 big investments across his life, and every single one landed at the worst possible moment. Here is the twist. Bob did do one thing right. He never sold. He never panicked and bailed out during the crashes, and he never touched that money. And despite having the worst timing imaginable, by the time Bob reached retirement, he had still built real, substantial wealth. It sounds impossible, but it points straight at the single most powerful lever in all of investing: your time horizon, meaning how long you stay invested. Because Bob gave his money decades to recover and compound, the sheer length of time he stayed in the market completely overwhelmed his terrible entry points. So think about what that means for you. If the worst-timed investor in the world can still come out ahead simply by refusing to sell and staying patient, then you, making steady, regular investments, are in a far stronger position than that nervous feeling is telling you. There are also two number tricks that quietly make waiting look safer than it really is. The first is the difference between price return and total return. The chart you see on the news only shows the price, and it hides dividends. Dividends are the cash payments the companies send to their shareholders out of their profits. Over the long run, reinvesting those dividends has been a massive share of how investors actually made their money. By some measures, around 40% of the market's total return going all the way back to the 1930s came from reinvested dividends, according to data from Hartford Funds. When you sit in cash on the sidelines, you collect none of that. The second trick is the difference between nominal and real. Nominal is just the number on your screen. If you park $10,000 in a savings account and it stays $10,000, it looks like you have lost nothing. But your real return can actually be negative because of inflation, which is the steady rise in prices. For everyday things, measured by the government's Consumer Price Index, that 10,000 still says 10,000, but year after year it buys fewer groceries, less gas, and fewer flights than before. So parking your money on the sidelines is not the neutral, safe pause it feels like. It is a slow, invisible leak. Add it all up, and waiting for the perfect moment quietly costs you three things at once: the compounding you never captured, the dividends you never collected, and the purchasing power that inflation ate while you waited. Now the honest part, because being straight with you is the whole point of this channel. None of this means that stocks only go up. And it does not mean that valuations never matter. The near term is genuinely unpredictable. A record high absolutely can be followed by a rough patch. It is entirely possible to buy today and watch the market drop tomorrow. You should fully expect drops along the way. That is simply the price of admission for long-term returns. And sometimes buying the top really does hurt, when prices have completely detached from reality. The clearest example is Japan. In late 1989, the Nikkei, which is Japan's main stock index, hit a massive all-time high, fueled by an enormous bubble in both stocks and real estate. Valuations were completely untethered from the actual economy. When that bubble burst, the market did not bounce back in a few years. It took roughly 34 years for the Nikkei to finally climb back to its 1989 peak. Anyone who bought that specific top and simply held on spent more than 3 decades just trying to break even. So the point is not that highs always pay off. The point is narrower and truer than that. A record high on a broad and diversified index does not reliably predict a crash, and nobody can consistently time the perfect entry. The real danger is not the high itself. It is euphoria, paying any price at all because you assume growth will last forever, and believing that you can outsmart the market. That is why you set a few guardrails before you invest a single dollar. Any money you will need in the next few years stays out of the market. Keep an emergency fund, a few months of expenses in cash, so you are never forced to sell during a dip just to pay the bills. Give the money you do invest a long runway, think 5 years or more, and stay diversified, which just means spreading your money across many companies instead of betting it all on one. Because that is exactly what protects you from a single Japan-style blow-up. So what do you actually do with all of this? Here are 4 simple moves. First, split your money into 2 buckets. The cash you will need soon stays safe in savings, and the money you will not touch for 5 or more years becomes your investing money. That alone removes the fear of needing to pull it out during a dip. Second, automate it. Instead of agonizing over the one perfect day to invest, put in a set amount on a set. Schedule every payday or every month, no matter what the headline says. This is called dollar cost averaging, and it simply means buying steadily over time. When the market is high, your fixed amount buys fewer shares. When it dips, that same amount buys more. It quietly takes the timing decision, the one that trips everyone up, completely off your plate. Third, change how you measure progress. Stop staring at the daily price of your account and start thinking in total return over years, which is the price growth plus those reinvested dividends. Set your account to reinvest dividends automatically so they keep buying you more shares. Fourth, if you have a large lump sum and putting it all in at a high feels truly terrifying. It is completely fine to spread it over a few months, maybe in 4 or 6 equal pieces. Just do not let spreading it out quietly turn into waiting for a crash that may never come. The goal is to get your money working for you, not to hold out for a perfect moment that does not exist. So here is the whole thing, in one line. The all-time high is not your enemy. Trying to outsmart it is... A record high is just a normal sign of a functioning market, not a warning siren. And history says those highs have usually been stepping stones rather than cliffs. As long as you stay diversified, patient, and focused on years instead of days. The best day to start is usually the day you actually have money you will not need for a long time. If this helped you feel a little more confident, please subscribe and hit the bell so you catch more beginner-friendly investing. And I would genuinely love to hear from you, so drop a comment and tell me the headline or the feeling that has kept you from investing until now. I read them. See you in the next one.